Okay, so this is the last piece of subboard that is, that I am putting down in this house. I kept this chunk of subboard off so that way I had access to the crawl space underneath the addition here. And that's because there were still some things I needed to do underneath the house. Number one, I needed to put some insulation or some sort of cover over the big hole where the drain for the tub is. I didn't want mice getting up in there. I didn't want a draft or bugs getting up in there and living underneath the tub. So what I ended up doing was crawling down there and putting some rock wool insulation to cover that big hole. The other thing I needed to do was to finish bringing a water line up to where the toilet is going to be, so the toilet can be filled after the toilet has been flushed. And so I needed to crawl down into that space and, well, first of all, turn off the water to the house, crawl down and put a piece of PEX line up through the subfloor right next to where the toilet is going to be. So then once I was done with all of that, I no longer needed access to the crawl space for the rest of the project of this house, and so I was able to cover up that hole. And here I'm using the cut piece of Advantex subfloor, and first thing I did was applied some subfloor glue along the floor joists and slid the subfloor into its space, and then pre-drilled a bunch of holes and screwed it down with deck screws about every 6 inches or so along those floor joists. So that thing is now very secure into place, nice and flush with the subfloor that goes out to the living room and the subfloor that continues through the hallway. So nice, smooth transition there. And then I finished that up by sealing the gaps that are between the pieces of subfloor. So that way I don't have drafts coming up, and more importantly for me, I don't have bugs coming up. If you guys know, I really don't like to have bugs in my house. So I wanted to make sure that was sealed up quite nicely. I'm gonna let that stuff dry. The subfloor glue, the caulking that I put in, and then I can start laying down the subfloor out into the main room. So it's gonna be pretty exciting. But first what we need to do is get the flooring, that is, put into the hallway bathroom. So let's go ahead and do that now. So in order for me to get this piece here, I have to get this piece here, which means I need to get this piece and then this piece. I have a bunch of cascading pieces that need to be in place before I can get a transition into the bathroom. So I want to get the edge right here lined up nicely with the shape of the tub and the edge of the tub here, so that way I have about 1/8 inch gap so I can put silicone in here after I'm done. And this is not following that line very well. So I'm going to pound this row back until this hits, and then, well, you'll see what I'm going to do. So I'm going to pound this row back here. I just need to cut that little bit of sliver off right there. There. I just check on the other side of that row that the gap is not more than 1/2 inch. That's the thickness of the trim we're going to use. It looks good. Hello again. Welcome back from that very long time-lapse music montage. But the good news is I am so close to being done. I probably have maybe 4 or 5 more rows to go in this little small space right here. So I thought I would go ahead and just stop and show you the rest, not in time-lapse. And what I want to address right now is this space that is underneath the cabinet Toekick area. And what I'm hoping I can do is actually get a full width piece underneath without having to cut it. If I had slid this in underneath it, it does fit. You can see now there's a gap right here. My things that are going to stop me are, remember the feet that I use to raise and level the cabinets? The feet are about back here. So as long as this is not that wide, I think we're good to go. So I think what I'm going to do is I want to use a full piece in this area here. And the full piece will go all the way back and it'll end right there. That's a good length for me for all of the different patterns, or not even patterns, but where the ends are. I think it's a pretty good, like there's nothing around it, it looks visually good, and it'll allow me to tack this into place without any obstruction. So I think the way that I have to do this is start all the way at the end up here and tap it into place. And I'm just going to tap this all the way down. I'm just going to keep going all the way down. I'll meet you at the end. Got that one slid into place. I'm not going to do that again. That was a lot of work and it kind of banged up the side or the revealing edge here. I thought maybe I could cheat this one into place, but I can't. So I'm just going to do it the standard way, and that is get this thing lined up where it needs to go, but on one board behind it. And then I would take my spacer, which I have right here, and I line it up to the edge that I need to measure to, and then I just take my pencil and mark it. I'm just going to get this board underneath to raise my spacer. I just mark. So this is going to be cut out here, and then I just need to see where I need to stop. It's about right there. That'll go there. So I just need to cut out this little piece right there. I'll just take my blade and score along that line. All right, and then I just take I've already cut this with the saber saw. Okay. I should be able to scoot it down a little bit and get that underneath. I may need to, let's see, this edge lined up here where that needs to go. And this just needs to come off a little bit. That just needs to come off a little bit. So let's go take this little piece off here really quick. All right, let's try again. So. Lift. Come over. I'm probably making this a little bit more difficult than it needs to be, but I'm trying to reduce the amount of gap that I have right at the face here, so that way the trim that I put over this toe kick covers that little gap. So that's the way I roll. There we go. Aha! I got it. Okay, that amount of gap is perfectly acceptable. There is no gap under here though. So you can see it runs quite a bit. So there's no gap whatsoever. That's what I was going for, but pounding that in was just too time consuming, and it did a little bit of damage on the lip, on the edge here. And luckily that's going to be covered by the stove. Find the board that I want to be in this space. Does this board look good here? Yeah. Line this up to the end here. Grab my spacer. Can't do this without using the jigsaw. That was much easier than that one. Much bigger gap though. Whatever. There we go. That's still thick enough to be covered by the trim that's going to go over here, the toe kick trim. So I think it's going to be okay. Well, that one did not snap well at all. Let's see if it fits. Nope. Doesn't fit. So let's trim. There we go. That's better. last piece. I got lucky in that the last piece is going to fit perfectly in here lengthwise. So that's nice. All right, let's get this measured. So line this guy up, about right there. Yep, give me a nice space, expansion space over there. And my spacer here. Give me barely of a cut. All right, I'm just going to cut this piece and we'll put it into place. All right, let's see how I did. I tend to make these things a little tight to make it really easy to go, or so it makes it harder to go in. I guess what I'm trying to say is I make it a closer cut than I really need to. It still has the gap for expansion, but let's see how I did. A little too tight. Let's see. What am I hitting? I'm hitting one more cut. One more cut. That goes in there good. That goes in there good. Okay, it went in. I am so glad to be done with the floors. That took, I say this a lot, especially when it comes to doing the remodel in the house. That took way longer than I thought it was going to take. That was multiple days. I was only able to do about 5, maybe 6 hours a day at max, because it was just hurting my knees too much and my lower back and stuff. I'm just not used to doing flooring work. And to all those people that are in the trade of doing flooring work, my hat goes off to you, because that is tough work. But I'm done. Saved ourselves about $2,500 in labor if we would have had it done by professionals. So that's nice. I think it looks fantastic. So, man, what a relief. It is so nice having the flooring done. So next, we're gonna be doing doors, trim, putting cabinets in the bathrooms, sinks, tubs, finish work, that kind of stuff. So stick around, watch to the end. We're so close, guys. This has been a very long project. Many of you have watched from the beginning, and I really appreciate it. We're so close to being done, so close to moving in. I'm done, I'm exhausted, tired. Let's get on to the next one, on to the last finishing stages of the house. We'll see you next time. Thanks, bye.